increase the management, the number of management level employees at all?
The department has reduced in some cases management employees. As a matter of fact, in the central office, for next year's budget, you know, our budget, which is to remain constant in the institution, is to be reduced by 23 in the central office.
23 employees?
That is correct.
Okay. You haven't looked at decreasing the deputy secretaries at all?
No, we don't think that would be a good idea. As a matter of fact, when we, you know, as Deputy Klopotowski had mentioned earlier, for the regional deputies, you know, our system has grown dramatically over that time, and so has so many responsibilities. You know, what occurred back in, you know, in the early 1980s and what we're doing today is quite a bit different. You know, as someone who's been that, you know, our system was fairly loose back then. We weren't even a department when I started. So when you talk about how many deputy, you know, secretaries we had, we didn't even have a secretary. We had a commissioner who reported to the Office of General Counsel when I started. So we did have a deputy commissioner. But so, you know, the number of deputy secretaries in regional, you know, to oversee the number of prisons. I mean, if you look at it that way, when we have 9 and we've tripled that number, and we've got 1 over approximately 9 now to oversee those facilities, I don't see that's an issue. Plus, you know, the deputy secretary for specialized programs, you know, community corrections program has significantly, I mean, we basically had it in the hundreds, not in the thousands when I started. So, you know, things have just increased dramatically.
Okay. You were here during the Commonwealth's opening statement, and they had talked about all the employees of the Commonwealth have been asked to sort of pitch in as the Commonwealth's opening, the attorney said in the opening, because of the financial times. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And you talked about the copay, or I don't know if you use that terminology, but when an inmate goes to see a medical provider, they have to pay some type of copay.
We use that term.
Okay. And is it $5? Is that?
It is $5.
All right. Have you looked at increasing that at all?
We have not looked at that recently. We have opened up recently an email box for people to send in suggestions. We've got over 500 cost suggestions in, which we're evaluating. One of those is has requested that. We have increased that number from $2 when it originally started as the copay to $5 within a period of 5 years.
And when was that last increase?
In 2007.
Okay. You talked about the studies that the Department of Corrections have done in regard to recidivism rates and the rearrest rates. How many other studies, in your experience, with the department has the department conducted in regard to these types of issues that inmates have faced?
I'm not sure what the question is.
Sure. You talked about studies that you do in regard to inmates. In particular, you mentioned the rearrest rates, the recidivism rate, things of that nature. Are these studies, are there more than just these 2 types of studies that the department's done in regard to inmates?
No. We have a planning and research unit that does internal studies. We rely also on universities who do studies for us. We use studies that are from other states and around the country as well.
Okay. And you talked about, in regard to idle pay, you said that an inmate receives idle pay, one of the prongs in order...
They receive GLP.
Okay.
This, if you're saying I say, you might be calling it idle pay.
Okay.
Call it idle pay.
What do you call it?
General labor pool, that's what's in the
Okay.
policy.
And they get paid to do nothing, is that correct? And what are they doing to get that pay? They're being idle, aren't they?
Let me go back to the first part of it, that Yes, they do not have a permanent job. There's certain expectations that they're expected to keep them. Idle, to me, sounds like we just have people sitting around by their own choice. And we have, like I said, if there is their own choice, they don't get paid. If it's because there's not sufficient jobs in the system, that they need to maintain their programming, etc., they don't have a job. You are correct in that.
You use the term through no fault of their own. You remember that term? Is that in the regulation?
Yes.
Now, it's their own fault that they're in prison, isn't it? I mean, so the fact that they're in prison, can't get a job, is their own fault, is it not?
No fault of their own through being in the prison system.
Yep, okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Now, what do they get paid, actually? What does an inmate get paid?
They are paid 72 cents a day.
Okay. And that's if they're working, you know, whether they're working in the chow facilities or what, that's overall?
GOP rate.
Okay. And has that increased? What's been the?
It's actually decreased.
Okay. And when did it decrease?
I don't have the date of the last policy. It's been a few years.
Okay. Now, you heard the Commonwealth talk about everybody trying to chip in across the Commonwealth. Have you asked the inmates to take a pay decrease?
At this point, we have not.
Okay.
But I would like to point out, though, as what Councilor Commonwealth had stated about the recent increases for employees and whatever, that we have not given the inmates a pay increase in 12 years.
Okay. You talked about the commissary. Now, who operates the commissary?
The commissary is operated by Correctional Industries.
Okay. And is that a private company?
No, that's part of the Department of Corrections.
Okay. Is there a private company that's involved in that at all?
Only private companies that sell products to us to be sold.
Okay. All right. And you said that there's profit off of this, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And 1.5 million went into the Inmate General Welfare Fund.
That is correct.
All right. Is that 1.5 million in one fiscal year?
Yes.
All right. Is that the 09-10 fiscal year or?
Yes, it's roughly the same.
All right.
Current year as last year.
And is that 1.5 in the last fiscal year, is that the norm, or is that extremely high? Is it low?
No, that's about average. The prices, you know, have not changed significantly in the commissary.
Okay. And things that's used for, do you have like pizza parties for the inmates?
No.
Okay. Do you bring outside food vendors in for the inmates?
No.
All right. What do you use that money for then?
The money, as I mentioned before, was that we use that for the activities, such as we buy all the sporting equipment in the facilities, we buy the televisions in the block, we buy the recreational books in the library, we pay for things in the chapel, a number of different activities.
Okay. And you also heard at least one of the slides, and I'm not sure if you talked about this, but the one slide talked about, it was in regard to safety and security. And it said from 2000 till present, $33 million was spent to increase safety and security, enhance the term. Do you remember that slide?
Right, yep.
Okay. So if we do that 2000 to 2011, we're talking about 33 million over about 11 years, is that?
For that total period.
Okay. So we're talking about 3 million a year over 11 years?
That's what the figures indicate, yes.
Okay.
That would not include capital expenditures,
Right.
such as a perimeter intrusion system, whatever that was paid with capital funds. This is just state operation.
Okay. So but you would agree with me, it's roughly $3 million a year to enhance the safety and security, correct? All right. So $3 million a year, if we compare that to the 1.5 million that you're putting into the Inmate General Welfare Fund, you're spending about half as much for baseball bats and things of that nature per year for the inmates than you are compared to enhancing security for the COs. Is that correct?
Well, let me go back to where this number
Well,
comes from.
wait, let me, if you don't understand the question, just tell me you don't understand the
We can
question.
explain. We can all agree that 1.5 million is half of 3 million, and everybody in the room knows that, so let them
But
explain.
I just wanted to go back and mention about what the 3 million means.
Go ahead, you can explain, go ahead.
The 3 million means that they're fixed assets for recurring maintenance projects to improve security at a specific part of the prison. If we're buying new weapons, for instance, or the vests or anything like that, that's not included in that figure. This is just fixed assets which have a value of $5 million or $5,000 each item, or it's a project worth more than $10,000 a year. That's what the 3 million is.
Okay. And we can agree that, as the arbitrator so correctly pointed out, you're spending about half that on baseball bats and things of that nature.
We are spending that in the IQWF activities, et cetera.
Okay, all right. You also talked about bringing private industry. There's been a thought to bring private industry into the facilities. Is that correct?
Yes.
So private industries would come in and propose that the inmates would make widgets, and you would make these widgets and you could sell them and make a profit. Is that basically what you're looking to do?
That would be correct.
All right. So, you know, according to the Commonwealth, we're in the worst economic times that the Commonwealth has faced. You want to take away private jobs from the citizens of the Commonwealth and give them to inmates? Is that what you want to do?
The PI legislation has an elaborate series of oversight with labor, et cetera, that would be overseeing that. A lot of the stuff that we do in there is like in the shoe shop. If somebody loses their job, they're not going out working in a shoe shop, you know, making in a factory in PA because they're being made overseas, et cetera. So all that would have to be looked at. That is, and you are correct that that is a real sensitive issue in terms of taking jobs away from the citizens. So anything that would happen like that would have to be closely examined.
Okay. Now, you talked about the capacity expansion, and I want to ask you, you talked about a net increase, and you used the figure of $685,300,000.
Yes.
How do you derive that figure?
Most of that is made up of the new institutions. The two institutions at Eagle View cost approximately $400 million for that amount, and the Benner is $200 million. So $600 million is pretty much just for those 3 prisons. Other housing units, what we call a hard unit or general services project costs approximately $12 million. For one of those, a modular housing unit costs approximately $2.5 million.
And what are you currently paying the state of Michigan to house the inmates that are there now?
$62 a day.
Okay. And what's the total figure? I mean, is it $1 million a day? Is it $1 million a week?
But I don't have the figure. It was 1,100 inmates times 62 times 365. We give you the annual figure.
Okay.
And although I'm the numbers guy, I can't figure that out.
And well, let me ask you this. Have you backed that figure out of the $685 million?
No.
Okay. So the $685 million is not, if you don't back out the Michigan figure, you don't have a true figure then, do you?
I don't know how you make that kind of a statement, because what we're talking is make a construction cost to build facilities.
Okay.
So the Michigan inmates factor into actual construction costs.
If you're paying to house the inmates in Michigan right now, that's a cost to the department, correct?
It's not a construction cost.
Okay. But you're not going to pay that any longer once you move those inmates? Okay. So when you talk about the 685, that has nothing, the Michigan figure is not involved in that figure at all?
No, it's a construction cost. It's not an operational cost.
Okay. That's all I have.
Any further questions from the Commonwealth?
I do just have one question for Deputy Klopotowski. you've testified that you actually started your career as a correctional officer, correct?
That's correct.
And just a moment ago, you heard some testimony that the Department of Corrections